Imagine yourself in a time of uncertainty, where danger looms and the future seems uncertain. In those moments, it can feel overwhelming to know what to do or how to act. But in the story of Abigail, we find a woman who, even in the face of chaos, chose the path of wisdom, humility, and grace. Her actions not only saved her household, but also changed the course of a kingdom. Today, her story serves as a powerful reminder that God equips us with the wisdom we need to navigate life's challenges, no matter how daunting they may seem. As we journey through the story of Abigail, you'll discover how her wisdom disarmed a king, how her faith gave her courage, and how her legacy of peacemaking continues to inspire us today. We will explore the profound impact one woman can have when she trusts in God's guidance, even when the odds are against her. Through Abigail's life, we will uncover lessons that can transform our own lives. Lessons about humility, peacemaking, and the power of walking in grace. By the end of this message, you will see how Abigail's wisdom can be applied to your own life, empowering you to face your own challenges with faith and courage. Her story will remind you that no matter what situations arise, God is always with you, guiding your steps. So let's dive in and discover the hidden wisdom of Abigail, the woman who disarmed a king and left a legacy of peace. Abigail's story begins in a time of tension and unrest. As the wife of Nabal, a wealthy but harsh man, she found herself facing an unexpected crisis. David, the future king of Israel, had sent men to Nabal for provisions, but Nabal responded with arrogance and cruelty. Abigail was thrust into the middle of this conflict, knowing that her husband's actions could provoke a deadly response from David. In moments like these, the first challenge we face is deciding how to react. Will we respond with fear, or will we choose a path of wisdom? Abigail didn't let fear control her. Though the situation was dangerous, she chose to act with clarity and purpose. Her decision to intervene was not made out of obligation, but out of a deep sense of responsibility. How often do we find ourselves in moments where everything seems to be falling apart, and we wonder, what can I do? Abigail's story reminds us that even in the face of chaos, there is always an opportunity to bring peace. Her first challenge wasn't just external, it was internal. Abigail had to confront her own emotions and fears before she could take action. She could have been paralyzed by the enormity of the situation or overwhelmed by her feelings towards her husband's foolishness. Yet, instead of succumbing to anger or despair, she chose a different path, one of wisdom and grace. How often do we face challenges where our emotions threaten to overwhelm us? Abigail's example teaches us that we can rise above our emotions to make wise decisions. Her ability to stay calm and think clearly in such a tense situation is a testimony to her character. As women of faith, we are called to emulate that same calm in the midst of life's storms. We may not be facing armies or kings, but our challenges can feel just as overwhelming. Abigail's story invites us to trust that God can use us, even in the most difficult moments, to bring peace and resolution. Abigail's wisdom in that moment was a reflection of her deep faith. She believed that God was in control, even when everything around her seemed out of control. Her actions were not just about stopping David from attacking, they were a reflection of her trust in God's providence. As we face our own tense situations, we too can lean on our faith to guide us through. The first challenge Abigail faced was a defining moment in her life. It set the stage for what was to come and revealed her true character. Just as Abigail's actions had far-reaching consequences, so too do our choices. Every situation we face is an opportunity to reflect God's wisdom, even when the pressure is high. In the heat of conflict, it's easy to believe that power lies in loud words and forceful actions. But Abigail's story reveals a different truth. The true power in difficult situations often comes from humility. When she learned about the threat David posed after Nabal's insult, Abigail could have reacted with pride or defensiveness. Instead, she chose the path of humility, taking the blame for her husband's actions and seeking peace with a heart full of grace. Humility doesn't mean weakness. In fact, it takes incredible strength to set aside one's pride, especially when facing injustice. Abigail demonstrated this strength when she approached David. She bowed before him, a gesture of respect, acknowledging his authority even though she could have felt justified in her anger toward her husband's foolishness. Abigail teaches us that humility is not about diminishing ourselves. It's about recognizing the greater good and acting with wisdom. When we are faced with conflict, our first reaction is often to defend ourselves, to justify our actions, or to prove that we are right. But Abigail's example shows us that humility can diffuse even the most volatile situations. By humbling herself before David, she not only calmed his anger, but she also protected her household from destruction. How often do we overlook the power of humility in our own lives, thinking that the only way to resolve conflict is to be strong and assertive? Abigail's humility allowed her to see the situation clearly. She didn't allow pride to cloud her judgment or emotions to dictate her actions. Instead, she sought peace with a clear mind and a humble heart. In a world that often values pride and self-assertion, Abigail's story reminds us that humility can lead to true resolution and lasting peace. Her actions speak volumes about the kind of woman she was, one who valued peace over pride and wisdom over impulsiveness. In our relationships, whether in the family, workplace, or church, we are often confronted with moments of conflict. These moments test our character and our willingness to humble ourselves for the greater good. Abigail's response to conflict teaches us that when we choose humility, we are choosing the path of peace. It might not always be easy, but the results can be transformative, not just for us, but for everyone around us. As we reflect on Abigail's story, we are reminded that humility opens the door to God's greater plans. By stepping down and placing others before ourselves, we reflect Christ's example of ultimate humility. Just as Abigail's humility softened David's heart, our humility can bring peace and healing to the conflicts we face today. Abigail's wisdom wasn't just a gift. It was a force that guided her in moments of great uncertainty. When she made the bold decision to meet David, she was not only risking her life, but also her future. Yet, her heart was filled with the kind of wisdom that only comes from a deep trust in God. She knew that peace was possible, but it required more than just words. It required a courageous act. Abigail's heart of wisdom drove her to take action when many would have been paralyzed by fear. Her bold move to intercept David on his way to destroy her household was nothing short of remarkable. Abigail didn't wait for someone else to solve the problem. Instead, she took responsibility and acted quickly. This kind of boldness comes when we are confident in the wisdom God has placed in our hearts. There will be moments in our lives when we are called to step out in faith, even when the path ahead is uncertain. Abigail shows us that wisdom is not passive, it takes action. Wisdom doesn't always look like what the world expects. While others might have tried to reason with David from a distance or avoid the confrontation altogether, Abigail chose to meet him face to face. She rode out to meet the future king with gifts, but more importantly, with a heart full of wisdom and humility. Her boldness teaches us that there are times when wisdom requires us to step into difficult situations, not away from them. As Abigail approached David, she spoke with grace and conviction. Her words were not only wise, but filled with the Spirit of God, touching David's heart in a way that no one else could. How often do we face moments where wisdom calls us to be bold, to speak up, or to take action? It's in those moments that God uses us to bring about peace and change. Abigail's bold move was not just a moment of bravery, it was a moment of divine intervention. In our own lives, We are faced with decisions that require both wisdom and boldness. It can be tempting to stay silent or wait for others to act. But Abigail's example encourages us to trust the wisdom God has given us. There is power in acting boldly with a heart rooted in wisdom. It's in these moments that we see God working through us in ways we never imagined. If this message touched your heart, share in the comments how God has guided you through moments of uncertainty, or simply comment wisdom to let us know you're with us on this journey of faith. Your story could inspire someone else to trust God's wisdom in their life. While Abigail exemplified wisdom and grace, her husband Nabal demonstrated the opposite. His name itself meant fool, and he lived up to that name with his actions. When David's men approached Nabal, asking for provisions in exchange for the protection they had provided, Nabal responded with arrogance and disregard. He was not only insulting David, a respected leader, but also placing his household in danger. Nabal's foolishness serves as a stark contrast to Abigail's wisdom, reminding us of the consequences of pride and rash decisions. Nabal's refusal to help David was more than a simple mistake. It was an act of arrogance that could have cost him and his entire household their lives. This serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of humility and discernment. Nabal's pride blinded him to the reality of the situation, while Abigail's humility allowed her to see clearly and take action. In our own lives, how often do we let pride get in the way of making wise decisions? Abigail's story teaches us the value of listening to wisdom over ego. The contrast between Nabal and Abigail is striking. While Nabal was driven by selfishness and greed, Abigail acted out of compassion and responsibility. Her wisdom saved their household, while Nabal's foolishness nearly destroyed it. This story shows us that wisdom is not just about intelligence, it's about understanding the bigger picture and acting with a heart of humility. In moments of decision, we are faced with the choice of following the path of wisdom or letting pride lead us astray. Nabal's foolishness also serves as a reminder of how our actions affect those around us. His harsh response to David's request didn't just endanger himself, it put his entire household at risk. Abigail's intervention highlights the power one person's wisdom can have in saving others from the consequences of another's foolishness. This is a lesson we can all carry with us. Even when others around us act foolishly, our wisdom can bring peace and resolution. There are moments in life where we may encounter people like Nabal, those who act rashly and without thought for others. In these moments, we have a choice: to react out of frustration or to respond with the wisdom and grace that Abigail displayed. Her ability to rise above Nabal's foolishness and take control of the situation speaks to the strength of her character and her trust in God. Ultimately, Nabal's story is a cautionary tale about the dangers of pride and impulsiveness. It reminds us that wisdom is not just about making the right decisions, but also about being mindful of the consequences of our actions. Abigail's wisdom stands in sharp contrast to Nabal's foolishness, and her story encourages us to choose wisdom even when those around us do not. Abigail's encounter with David is a masterclass in the art of disarming not just a man, but a king in the making. When Abigail approached David, she didn't come with force or demands. She came with wisdom, humility, and a strategy that would change the course of events. In that moment, she knew that David was angry and prepared for battle, but instead of reacting to his anger, she responded with grace. Abigail's ability to disarm David emotionally and intellectually is a powerful reminder of how wisdom and kindness can turn even the most intense situations around. Disarming someone who is angry or upset requires more than just calm words. It requires empathy. Abigail didn't just ask David to reconsider his actions, she placed herself in his shoes, acknowledging the offense Nabal had caused while also appealing to David's better nature. By recognizing his right to be upset, she made David feel heard and understood. In our own lives, when we face conflicts, we can learn from Abigail's approach. Instead of defending ourselves or escalating the situation, we can choose to listen, empathize, and disarm with wisdom and grace. What made Abigail's approach so effective was her ability to speak to David's future, not just his present anger. She reminded him that as the future king of Israel, his actions would carry weight beyond this moment. By pointing David toward his destiny, Abigail lifted his eyes from the immediate conflict to the greater calling on his life. This was not manipulation, it was wisdom. Abigail understood that people are more likely to be disarmed when we speak to their potential rather than their mistakes. Her words not only calmed David's anger, but also inspired him to think beyond the present moment. In the heat of conflict, it's easy to forget that the other person has their own struggles, emotions, and pressures. Abigail didn't see David as an enemy. She saw him as a man who needed to be reminded of who he truly was. This is the art of disarming, a skill that requires us to see beyond the surface of a situation and into the heart of the person we are dealing with. Abigail's wisdom teaches us that true resolution comes not from overpowering someone, but from guiding them to see the situation with clarity and perspective. Abigail's act of disarming David is a powerful example of how we can bring peace into our own lives. Whether we are dealing with family conflicts, workplace disputes, or personal misunderstandings, we can choose to be peacemakers. It's not always easy, but Abigail's story shows us that when we approach conflict with wisdom and humility, we have the power to change the outcome. By disarming David, Abigail not only saved her household, but she also helped David stay true to his calling as a future king. In the end, Abigail's wisdom and humility didn't just disarm David, they won his respect. This moment of peace between them was a turning point, not just for their immediate situation, but for the greater plans that God had for David's life. Abigail's story encourages us to believe that, with wisdom and grace, we can disarm even the most challenging conflicts and bring about a resolution that honors God. Abigail's legacy is not defined by her status or wealth, but by her ability to make peace in the midst of turmoil. She was a woman who understood the value of peacemaking, and her actions on that fateful day left a lasting impression on David and all those around her. Her story reminds us that true strength is found in the ability to bring peace, even when the situation seems impossible. Abigail's legacy teaches us that we, too, can leave behind a legacy of peace through our words and actions. Peacemaking is more than just resolving conflicts. It is about fostering harmony and understanding in all aspects of life. Abigail's intervention prevented bloodshed, but it also did something more profound. It restored balance. By approaching David with humility and wisdom, she diffused a volatile situation and reminded everyone involved of the value of peace. In our lives, we are often presented with opportunities to be peacemakers, whether in our families, communities, or workplaces. Abigail's example shows us that peacemaking is a powerful gift we can offer to others. Abigail's legacy of peacemaking was not a one-time event. It was a reflection of her character. She didn't seek recognition for her actions, nor did she try to gain power from the situation. Instead, she acted out of a genuine desire to protect her household and bring about peace. This kind of selflessness is at the heart of true peacemaking. It requires us to put aside our own interests and focus on the well-being of others. In doing so, we not only resolve conflicts, but also build bridges of trust and understanding. The impact of Abigail's actions extended far beyond the immediate conflict with David. Her wisdom and grace left a lasting impression on David, who would go on to become one of Israel's greatest kings. Abigail's ability to make peace in that moment helped shape the course of history. We may not be faced with decisions that affect the fate of kingdoms, but our choices as peacemakers can still have a profound impact on those around us. Just as Abigail's legacy influenced the future, our efforts to bring peace can leave a lasting mark on the lives of others. In a world that often glorifies conflict and division, Abigail's story stands as a reminder of the power of peace. Her actions were not driven by pride or a desire for control, but by a deep sense of responsibility to do what was right. Her legacy of peacemaking invites us to reflect on how we can bring peace into our own lives and the lives of others. Whether through small acts of kindness or bold decisions in difficult situations, we can all contribute to a legacy of peace. Abigail's story challenges us to think about the legacy we are leaving behind. Are we contributing to peace in our relationships and communities, or are we allowing conflict to take root? As we reflect on her life, we are reminded that peacemaking is not a passive act. It requires courage, wisdom, and a willingness to step into difficult situations. Abigail's legacy of peacemaking inspires us to choose peace, even when the path is hard. Abigail's faith and courage were two pillars that guided her through one of the most uncertain times in her life. Faced with the possibility of violence and the destruction of her household, she did not give in to fear. Instead, she stepped forward with faith in God's guidance and the courage to act. In moments of uncertainty, it's easy to feel paralyzed or overwhelmed, but Abigail's story reminds us that faith and courage can carry us through even the darkest times. Her faith wasn't just a passive belief, it was an active trust in God's sovereignty. Abigail knew that the situation with David was dangerous, but she also believed that God could work through her actions to bring about peace. This kind of faith requires more than just hoping for the best. It requires stepping out in trust, even when the outcome is uncertain. In our own lives, we are often called to act in faith, trusting that God is working behind the scenes. Even when we can't see the full picture, courage in times of uncertainty doesn't always come naturally. It's normal to feel fear when faced with the unknown, but Abigail's story shows us that courage is not the absence of fear, it's the decision to move forward despite it. Abigail's courage allowed her to approach David, a powerful leader, without knowing how he would respond. Her bravery came from her faith, a deep-seated belief that God was in control. This is a powerful reminder for us. Our courage is often fueled by our faith in God's plan. Faith and courage go hand in hand. Abigail didn't know how things would turn out when she left her home to meet David, but she trusted that God would guide her. It's in these moments of uncertainty that our faith is tested and our courage is strengthened. Abigail's story encourages us to lean on our faith, especially when the road ahead is unclear. We may not know what the future holds, but we can trust that God is with us every step of the way. In our own times of uncertainty, whether it's a personal crisis, a family challenge, or a difficult decision, we can look to Abigail's example. Her faith in God gave her the courage to act, and her courage helped her bring peace to a situation that could have ended in disaster. We too can find the strength to face our own uncertainties with faith and courage, knowing that God is always present, guiding us through. Abigail's faith and courage not only saved her household, but also left a lasting impact on David's life. Her ability to trust in God and act with bravery in a moment of crisis changed the course of history. As we reflect on her story, we are reminded that faith and courage are gifts from God, given to us to face the challenges of life with strength and hope. When we embrace these gifts, we too can overcome uncertainty and walk boldly in faith. Abigail's actions on that fateful day were more than just an act of peacemaking. They changed the course of a kingdom. In a single moment, she stepped into a situation that could have led to great bloodshed and redirected it toward peace. It's hard to imagine that one woman in a society where women often held little influence could have such a profound impact on the future of Israel. But Abigail's wisdom, humility, and courage altered the trajectory of David's life, and by extension, the kingdom he would one day rule. When Abigail approached David, she didn't just save her household from destruction, she also saved David from making a decision that could have tarnished his reputation as a future king. David was on the verge of taking revenge into his own hands, something that could have haunted him for the rest of his life. Abigail's intervention reminded David of who he was, God's chosen servant, destined for greatness. In doing so, she helped preserve the integrity of his future kingship. Her wisdom reached far beyond the immediate situation and had lasting effects. What makes Abigail's story so powerful is that she wasn't motivated by self-interest. Her actions were driven by a desire to protect those around her, even those who had wronged her, like her husband Nabal. In this, we see a reflection of the selfless love and wisdom that God calls us to embody. Abigail's willingness to act for the greater good is a reminder that, no matter our position or circumstances, we can make a difference. Even when we feel powerless, God can use us to bring about change in ways we never expected. Abigail's influence on David also highlights the profound impact one person can have on another's spiritual journey. David, in his anger, was about to act out of impulse. But Abigail's wise words and actions led him to pause, reflect, and choose a different path. This is a powerful reminder that we, too, have the ability to influence those around us. Through our words, actions, and example, we can help guide others toward wisdom, peace, and God's will. The ripple effect of Abigail's actions didn't end with David. Her decision to intervene set in motion events that would shape the future of Israel. By preventing bloodshed and reminding David of his calling, she played a crucial role in preserving the kingdom's future stability. This serves as a reminder that even our seemingly small actions can have far-reaching consequences. When we act with wisdom and humility, we allow God to work through us to accomplish his greater plans. Abigail's legacy is one of influence and impact. She may not have been a queen or a warrior, but her actions changed the course of a kingdom. Her story encourages us to believe in the power of one person to make a difference, even in the most challenging circumstances. Just as Abigail changed the course of David's life and the kingdom of Israel, we too can be instruments of change in our own spheres of influence. No matter how small or large they may seem, Abigail's story offers timeless wisdom that we can apply to our own lives, no matter the circumstances we face. Her ability to navigate difficult situations with grace, humility, and wisdom is a powerful example for us today. We may not be dealing with kings or armies, but we all face challenges in our relationships, workplaces, and personal lives that require the same qualities Abigail demonstrated. Her story shows us that wisdom is not just about knowing the right thing to do, but about having the courage and faith to act on that knowledge. One of the key lessons we can learn from Abigail is the importance of humility. In a world that often celebrates pride and self-promotion, Abigail's humility stands out as a beacon of strength. She wasn't concerned with defending her own reputation or asserting her rights. Instead, she focused on what was best for her household and for the future of her people. In our own lives, we are often tempted to let pride drive our decisions, but Abigail reminds us that true wisdom comes from a humble heart. Another valuable lesson from Abigail is the power of timing and discernment. Abigail didn't rush into action impulsively. She took time to assess the situation and act strategically. She knew when to speak and when to remain silent. Her wisdom in approaching David at just the right moment turned the tide of events. This teaches us the importance of seeking God's guidance in our decisions and trusting his timing. Acting too quickly or too slowly can often lead to unintended consequences. But when we seek God's wisdom, we can trust that he will guide our steps. Abigail's story also highlights the importance of peacemaking. In a situation filled with anger and potential violence, Abigail chose to be a peacemaker. She didn't add fuel to the fire or escalate the conflict. Instead, she sought to bring about resolution through understanding and grace. In our own lives, we often face conflicts that seem impossible to resolve. Abigail's example encourages us to be agents of peace, trusting that God can work through us to bring healing and restoration to broken relationships. One of the most profound aspects of Abigail's wisdom is her ability to see the bigger picture. She wasn't just focused on the immediate crisis with David, she understood that her actions had long-term consequences. By reminding David of his future as Israel's king, she helped him stay true to his calling. In our lives, it's easy to get caught up in the moment and lose sight of the bigger picture. But Abigail teaches us to look beyond the immediate situation and consider how our actions today can impact the future. Ultimately, applying Abigail's wisdom in our lives means living with a heart that is aligned with God's will. It means seeking His guidance in every situation, acting with humility, and trusting that He is in control. Just as Abigail's wisdom brought peace to a potentially disastrous situation, our wisdom, rooted in faith, can bring peace and resolution to the challenges we face. Her story encourages us to live with intentionality, knowing that our actions can have far-reaching effects. As we reflect on Abigail's story, we are reminded of the power of walking in grace. Abigail's life was marked by her ability to navigate difficult situations with wisdom, humility, and peace. But more than that, she showed us the beauty of living a life of grace, where every decision is made with a heart aligned with God's will. Walking in grace means choosing to trust in God's plans, even when the path ahead is uncertain. It means extending forgiveness, seeking peace, and living with a heart full of compassion. Walking in grace doesn't mean that life will be without challenges. Abigail faced tremendous obstacles, from her difficult marriage to the threat of violence from David. Yet, in each moment, she chose to walk with grace. Her story reminds us that grace is not just something we receive from God, it's something we extend to others. In our own lives, there will be moments when we are called to extend grace to those who have wronged us, just as Abigail extended grace to Nabal and David. It's in these moments that we reflect the heart of God to those around us. Living with grace also means trusting that God is in control, even when we can't see how things will work out. Abigail didn't know how David would respond to her when she went to meet him, but she trusted that God would guide her. Walking in grace requires that same trust, knowing that God is working behind the scenes, even when we can't see the full picture. This kind of trust allows us to move forward with peace, knowing that God's grace is sufficient for every situation we face. Another aspect of walking in grace is the ability to let go of control. Abigail didn't try to manipulate the situation or force a specific outcome. She trusted in God's wisdom and allowed Him to work through her actions. In our own lives, we often try to control the outcome of situations, but grace teaches us to release that need for control and trust in God's plan. When we walk in grace, we are free from the anxiety and fear that come from trying to manage every detail of our lives. Grace also gives us the strength to face the unknown. Abigail's grace was not just in her words, but in her actions. She stepped into an uncertain situation with courage and faith, knowing that God was with her. In the same way, when we walk in grace, we are empowered to face life's challenges with confidence, knowing that we are not alone. God's grace is our strength, and His presence is our peace. As we move forward in our own journeys, Abigail's story encourages us to walk in grace every day. Whether we are facing conflicts, uncertainties, or difficult relationships, we can choose to respond with grace, just as Abigail did. Walking in grace is not about perfection. It's about trusting in God's perfect plan and allowing His love to guide our actions. It's a path of peace, wisdom, and humility, one that leads us closer to God and to the people He has called us to be. As we come to the end of Abigail's story, we are reminded of the profound impact that wisdom, humility, and faith can have in our lives. Abigail's legacy of peacemaking and grace shows us that one person, guided by God's wisdom, can change the course of events, bring healing, and prevent destruction. Her actions are a testament to the power of trusting in God's plan, even when the situation seems hopeless. Through her life, we see that grace is not only something we receive from God, but something we can extend to others. Abigail's story challenges us to reflect on our own lives. Are we choosing the path of wisdom in our relationships and decisions? Are we extending grace to those around us, even when they don't deserve it? Like Abigail, we have the opportunity to be agents of peace, wisdom, and healing in the lives of others. Her story inspires us to walk in grace, trusting that God is with us in every situation, guiding our steps and giving us the courage to act. As you carry Abigail's lessons with you, may you be encouraged to face your own challenges with faith and humility. Remember that God's wisdom is available to you, and His grace is sufficient for every situation. Just as Abigail changed the course of a kingdom, you too can make a difference in the lives of those around you, one step of faith at a time. Before you go, I invite you to share this message with someone who might need encouragement today. And if this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell so you won't miss any of our future messages. Together, we can continue to grow in faith and wisdom, following the example of Abigail as we walk in grace.